Hello, Kaiju Seekers. Welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be mostly a semi-response to blackarooni's video, his response to Up from the Depths, and his video on Godzilla Kong the New Empire. And it'll be a general defense of the characters of Suko and Skar King. He had a few criticisms that he laid out, and what I think is a very nice way for me, considering that I've had a bit of an issue pinpointing a few criticisms and how to tackle them. Thankfully, thanks to his more condensed version of his points, I now feel I can do my better rebuttal for them, since there are a few disagreements I had. And today's is going to be focused on the characters of Suko and Skar King in particular. Mostly because, again, I disagreed with the way or his views on the characters. Starting with Suko, um, his assertment of Suko is basically that his character arc doesn't work, mostly due to the fact that if Suko, or that Suko has good reason to distrust Kong, considering that Kong himself did in fact fight against Suko, using him as a bludgeoning tool for the other apes. The thing with that is, though, that in that instance, that is a matter of self-defense, concerning Suko was the instigator of the fight in the first place. In fact, the first meeting with Kong and Suko just goes to show the fact that Suko sees that Kong is not one to hurt him, and the only reason Kong does hurt him in the first place is large in part due to the fact that it was a trap set by One Eye and the rest of the gang, and so Kong is merely defending himself. And blackarooni is right in saying that Suko has no reason to think that Kong wouldn't hurt him again. But I think what makes the character arc well written is the fact that it is shown both to us and to Suko that Kong isn't gonna hurt Suko for no good reason. And there's even one instance where there might be a reason Kong might retaliate against Suko. He still doesn't, because Kong is just not that kind of a monster or of a character. The first instance we see of this is when Suko, due to the fact that yes, he does mistrust Kong and wants to escape, lures Kong into a trap with the drowned viper. And now we know that Kong is able to defeat the drowned viper and later catch up to Suko. And Suko immediately is cowering in fear, because up to this point, before meeting Kong, it's implied heavily and both confirmed after the fact that, for the most part, Suko has only known abuse from the likes of Skar King and his minions. And so, he has good reason to fear Kong, but the moment Kong doesn't show any retaliation or physical abuse of any kind, Suko is confused and, taken aback by the fact that, Kong isn't going to hurt him. And Kong just lets him, walk it off. Because, Kong's not the type of person to do that. So this is the first instance we see of Suko learning that fact. And then that culminates later on when we see that Suko and Kong, well, Kong for the most part is having the meal. And later on we see that Suko is just staying by, hoping for scraps. Kong takes notice and offers Suko a piece of food, and it's not just a 180 to where Suko's just warming up to Kong now, but he's starting to show, or to learn even more, that Kong is a compassionate and good person. He's a good monster. And then that leads to one of the most beautiful scenes, as well as one of the most beautiful moments of Suko truly sharing a meal with someone, which is something he likely doesn't know very much of. Given the fact that most of his life he's probably just been waiting for the scraps that other people are eating. So that just goes to show that, you know, it's another learning moment for Kong. And then the next one comes later on, where Zuko has finally led him to all the other apes. And, even at this point, Zuko is trying to warn Kong of like that this is a bad idea. And he's still frightened. He's trying to, get his points across. But Kong is just taking it back and just goes into it. And we're introduced to Gnarled Finger, who, through the interactions with Zuko, we see is probably the only um, nice ape to Zuko, likely his immediate caretaker after Skar King. And so we see that there's this one good ape that Zuko trusts, and luckily the only one he trusts. And then we have the moment with the character who's only named Boots in the novel, but is a character that is somewhat of a small fan favorite. But it's another instance where we see that Zuko is seeing that Kong, after Boots is knocked down for not being able to do the job, Zuko sees that Kong will stand up for Boots, help him up, and then also stand up to the bully character, the Red Stripe, that comes in and antagonizes them. And so that is the third instance, or maybe third or fourth, technically the fourth one, where we see that Zuko is learning that Kong is a compassionate person who is, in his eyes, obviously going to be the better person to, ally with. And then comes in the introduction of Skar King. Skar King, up to this point, has been, well, technically, everyone says this is when he's introduced. When technically speaking, he was introduced very early on in the film, both through the video camera feed as well as the visions that Gio receives. And then his presence is further felt through the Red Stripes themselves and their actions. Zuko himself is implied. Somewhat implied in this film, and like further implied in external material, that Skar King is Zuko's father. And so, there's this overall presence he has through both his actions, the aftermath of his actions, the aftermath of his actions, that, there's his presence, there's his big bad, and his formal introduction, I would say, here is done very well with a very open book brandishing of his personality, which, to go into the defense of Skar King, the reason I feel that everyone like points to Skar King's personality as being a big plus in the movie is that his personality is unlike that of previous villains and most of the monsters in the Monsterverse. And what I mean by that is that his personality is one that is explicitly human-like, given the fact that his actions are all derived from seeking the pleasure in his torment. So, for instance, Skar King, and this goes into another moment to where we see that Gnarled Finger here protects Zuko from Skar King's, threatening display. When the moment Skar King hears Zuko's laugh, he's triggered into this feral state where he's like, an inch away from demonstrating the abuse towards Zuko. And here we see that Gnarled Finger is, as it was implied earlier, that he was the only caretaker for Zuko, standing up for Zuko, protecting him. And then this is an opportunity to where we see Skar King's personality on display, and it's very unique in the sense that we see that Skar King takes, like I said, takes pleasure in all of his torments, and unlike the personality of, say, like Ghidorah's personalities, to where they're all on display, they're all well on display, but it's still very grounded in that animalistic sense. Unlike Skar King, where he takes pleasure in tormenting Kong and Suko by killing Gnarled Finger. And Ghidorah wouldn't do that. Ghidorah would not kill Mothra to upset Godzilla into in an act of wanting to torment him. The only reason Ghidorah killed Mothra in King of the Monsters was because she got in the way of um, the gravity beams that were for Godzilla. And unless I'm misremembering, it was also just due to the fact that Mothra went in to attack Ghidorah in a last-ditch effort to save Godzilla, and so Ghidorah naturally just obliterated Mothra in that moment. It's not like he did it to make Godzilla angry or to make him sad. Whereas Skar King here does do that to make Zuko sad and also to antagonize Kong. We see that immediately by I don't believe it's this one on here, but we see that Skar King, is giddy by seeing Kong mad, and so that's one of the reasons why I would say many people enjoyed Skar King's personality and see that as one of the many good things that New Empire did. Is due to the fact that it's a personality we haven't seen in the MonsterVerse, and a personality that we haven't seen displayed in this way. And Skar King wears his personality on his sleeve. He'll strike poses. He'll show his emotions on his face. He will be giddy when he realizes that the puny humans beneath his feet are scattering, and he's finally on the surface. So it goes to show that Skar King is written in such a way to where his personality is very human-like, and it's very human-like in that there's a sense of true intentional malice that he takes pleasure in, and it's displayed all around in how he treats the apes and how he presents himself and how he controls through both pain and fear. And it goes hand in hand with Zuko's arc of knowing all his life that this is what Skar King is like, and by extension, all the other apes, minus the only one who cared for him. And then likely he sees this in Kong as well, and we're shown that he's not immediately trusting of Kong. Zuko has to learn that Kong is just like Gnarled Finger. And so when Gnarled Finger dies and Kong immediately stands up for Zuko and challenges the Skar King, it goes a long way to showing that for Zuko, Kong is the one who's going to step in and be the far better ruler than Skar King. And overall, that's my reasoning and defense of why this particular part of the film is both one of the better written aspects of the film, and one thing that I will say in defense of it and why it's good is because it's all decently written, decently portrayed. And I've conceded to the fact that Skar King is a underdeveloped villain, but not in the way that we wouldn't get what Skar King's deal is across to the audience. And it shows in how well the audience was able to see Skar King's personality, and it is what carries the character in this film for better and for worse for some people. For me, it's for better because we get this awesome villain who's very flashy, very prominent, and in a way very human because of the way he acts and how unique that is compared to the other villains of the past who, for the most part, were either just like intelligent animals with a clear personality, but still animals at the end of the day. Whereas Skar King, again, he's very human-like in his personality, and it offers a unique flavor of villain that we haven't gotten before. And so with that, I guess I'll end off my video. Hopefully, um, you guys can leave your thoughts and comments below. Let me know what you think of this, and why I think Suko and Skar King are one of the more favorite aspects of the film. Um, and blackarooni, feel free to leave a comment or respond to me elsewhere. Um, I will try to get to any of your other points in the video I felt I can respond to, because I genuinely think that your responses, even if I disagree with them, um, the way you concisely pinpoint them, I feel is overall better, for other people to help present their own rebuttals or arguments, counter arguments, and such. Um, and this one was mine, and hopefully I was able to present why I thought these aspects were worth defending. Um, and so, thank you all, Kaiju Seekers. Until next time, stay tuned for more to come. And over and out.